hey there, little buddy. Do you think you know maps? Do you think you're one of the greatest minds to have ever lived to understand a map because you sit there like, well, I play Hearts of Iron in Europe Universalis. I'm really smart. Alright, smart guy. Let's look at a map of the United States then. Let's see what you got. Yeah, you recognize that? Okay, cool. Yeah, basic maps. Got the states. That's the United States. Okay, that checks out. Let's look a little bit more in depth, though. Hyper realistic. And that is. Yeah, that's better. I bet you looked immediately at your state, and you're sitting there like, oh, I see mine. Oh, yeah, nothing's wrong with this map. But no! You're wrong. What if I told you that this is, in fact, propaganda created by the United States of America to distract you from the truth? This is 1984 in real life. This is the worst possible outcome. And there's nothing you can do about it either, because you're just going to sit there and take what the government gives you. In reality, this is not the case. Chances are, you live in the United States. This is the map you've grown up seeing. This is what you're used to. But there are actually people living in the United States who do not see this same map. As a matter of fact, they see that map and they think that it is incomplete and that there are pieces missing from it. And of course, the group that I'm talking about is the Native Americans who have been living on this continent for thousands of years. Although, there's a lot of people out there who will argue, oh yeah, you lost, you're gone. Well, in reality, the government disagrees with you because the United States government actually has federally recognized Indian lands. So yeah, right here, look at it. This is how the Native Americans see the same map that you are used to seeing. Of course, it includes the aspects of what we know and love, but they have some specific differences that you can see throughout. Now, it should be clear that this does not look like this. Following this Pacific coastline up, you can see nations like the Apache, the Navajo, tons of small settlements within California, moving up into the Northwest region, plenty up there, tons of diversity, split into 3 distinct regions that they recognize but are not applicable to the common United States map. Moving through the middle of the country, not much left in Texas, but you get to the state of Oklahoma, which everybody thinks, oh yeah, that's where all the Native American reservations are, but if you really look at the map, there's not much Oklahoma that really is straight up United States. Moving through Kansas, a little bit sprinkled in there. Up into the Great Plains, you've got the Siouan region, which is one of the most fascinating culture groups I have ever seen. Hugely prevalent out here. In the Midwest as well, tons of diversity, and this is all stuff that you would miss looking at the typical map. Moving up the Atlantic coast, of course most people know about Seminoles in Florida. Very sparse though throughout the eastern coast of the United States, as America's been there the longest and they're really good at kicking natives out of their land. Down in the Carolinas, you have places like the Cherokee, the Catawba, not a ton going around Washington, D.C., and then moving up into the Northeast, some scattered settlements that have managed to hold on for all of this time. But looking at this greater map, it really is just fascinating. There is so much more to the map than what meets the eye. This is the reality of how things function in certain parts of the nation. It's more prevalent in some areas than others, but in terms of control of regions, there are these native groups that hold on. They are essentially independent areas that exist, but of course they function under the United States federal government, as these small divided nations really don't have a chance to fight back against the strongest nation that the world has ever seen. However, there's one in particular that has made the news recently. I saw in a Al Jazeera article, Sovereign Flex, how a tribe defied officials through cannabis. This is in reference to the Cherokee Nation, who they have always had a strong identity and they see themselves as independent of the oppressive federal government, who has committed numerous atrocities against their people for the past several hundred years. And they exercised their sovereignty through legalizing marijuana in a part of the country where that is extremely taboo and certainly years out from happening. It starts here with Myrtle Driver, who is 80 years old and a well-respected member of the Cherokee community, and she was the first person to have what was considered a legal transaction of cannabis in the state of North Carolina. And to top it all off, she didn't pay using American dollars. She paid using wampum beads, which that is of value to their culture, and that is just further driving home the point that we are functioning outside of what the federal government insists upon, and we are going to have our own identity and do what we think is right for our people. It really is so important what they're doing here, because at the end of the day, these Native American tribes who have existed for quite literally forever are their own functioning states living within these United States. And they have more specific recognition than the typical states that fall into the Union. If anything, it's almost as if these tribes have their independence guaranteed by the United States and are able to act autonomously and do as they please, although, of course, this is not always held up, as the U.S. government is notorious for going against the treaties they have set with Native Americans, which has put them at this point. You have to take notice how on the Native American map it says Indian lands of federally recognized tribes of the United States. Federally recognized, these are lands in their possession. That does not match this map. The map that is shown to us in our education is incorrect, and the reality of how this nation functions is much more like this map. So who better to step to the United States government than people who were promised sovereign land and then do not have that promise upheld? Throughout history, the Native Americans have over and over been betrayed by the United States government, and this is an opportunity for them to exercise their autonomy. The article itself is a phenomenal read. I think what they're doing is very important, and I think this is something of high significance to their culture and their people, and it's certainly something that people are going to want to keep an eye on over the coming years, as this sets a very interesting precedent moving forward, especially in relation to minority groups respecting their freedoms and so on by a federal government. I mean, look at these guys. This is awesome. They've got such a long history, so much culture that is breezed over in the typical American education. And not only is it a long culture, but it's a rich culture, and they have had years and years of progress and change while also keeping intact with something that has existed for so long. And it gets so much deeper. It's all propaganda. What if I told you that out of those awesome pictures you just saw, one of them was from a completely separate, oppressed group of people who are formerly nomadic, still have nomadic ties, long, rich histories, and in the modern day are oppressed by far-off regimes that do not care for their well-being? While the modern-day Native Americans are not undergoing the radical genocide they had throughout history, the Uyghur Muslims in China are experiencing something very similar. Forced migration, torment by locals, forced cultural conversion, and many other unimaginable atrocities taking place in our modern day. This is the map of the spread of the Uyghur people throughout history, and it looks very similar to something. Almost identical in size to the contiguous United States that over time has wiped out this population and tried to make them subservient and essentially colonies, but there's no ocean separating them. They can just walk there. Really, this video doesn't have a ton of direction, just sort of me making very abstract connections, but, it is interesting to think that the map of the United States is propaganda in the sense that it is not showing the holdings of specific oppressed groups of people. And this is not something that's unique to the United States. It's done all over the world, but most notably in China. And there is huge outcry in the United States and the international community that something has to be done to prevent the Chinese from destroying the Uyghur culture. And it's hard for the United States to come forward and give a response, primarily because we don't want to start something that'll lead to people getting nuked, but also having to do with the fact that we're doing the same thing here. We, as in the federal governments that own each area, but in the United States and in China, there are people whose cultures are being stripped away because it is problematic for them to exist. So I hope the takeaway from this is just look deeper into everything that's right in front of you. The globe that you see in your classroom is not right. And there are people all over this world that live lives separate from what the published truth is. So I hope you found it interesting. It's all over the place, but yeah, some interesting food for thought. So hope you enjoyed.